Okay, so I heard the words recording in progress. I'm assuming we are good to go. I'm very excited to have Mr. Ross Terrell here today because one of the things that's really good is to actually, I can talk about editing all that I want, but to hear somebody discuss and share their personal experience with what it's like is a added layer of your education. So that's why I was really glad that Ross came. So Ross is an editor at Axios, and normally I talk about Axios in classes, and in my editing class that I didn't. But if you haven't heard of Axios, which I think you have, it's this new, fairly new, I'll call it fairly new news outlet that is 100% based in smart brevity. So it focuses on informing people and making it easy to understand either news or events or whatever is newsworthy, and it's typically done in newsletter form. So that's their primary platform is to do it. And another strategy that they use is they segment it into different cities so that you can look at things that deal with the markets, like stock markets or AM, PM, that gives you the rundown of important stories. But I feel like most of the focus often is on these local editions. So they'll have Atlanta and they'll have Boston. And Ross was just telling me they actually launched some new ones, like in Pittsburgh. And he works on Salt Lake. And you said San Francisco and San Diego, right?
Yep.
So think of this opportunity to get to know and not only get to know the local community, but to inform the local community, the things that really matter to them. So everything from the hard news and politics, all the way on the other end of the spectrum of how to enjoy the city. So that those newsletters do a great job of covering that. And I signed up for my Atlanta edition. I've gone on some of the West End tours that they recommended in that edition. So it's I feel that this platform is very relevant. Also, before we get started, I'll mention that, media is a small business. So I believe that Axios, I don't remember how long ago, but maybe less than 2 years ago, Axios was acquired by Cox Enterprises. That's the same organization that owns the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, the staple paper, newspaper, and media outlet in Atlanta, one of the biggest in Southeast. So it's part of a very sizable organization that has committed itself to media and specifically local media for its communities that it serves. So I just want to state that. Ross, how are you?
Doing all right. It's been a busy year, but so far so good.
Okay. I want to give you the opportunity to meet the students that are here. So we have Niles and Samaj. So Niles, why don't you come off mute and share your name, your major, and where you're from with Ross.
Hello, Ross. First, my name is Niles Garrison. I am a junior journalism major, concentration in sports, also a Spanish minor from Baltimore, Maryland.
Nice.
Nice to meet you.
Hola, ¿cómo estás? That's all I know. Samaj, your name, your major, and where you're from.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Samaj Musco. I'm a senior sports journalism major, and I'm originally from Dallas, Texas.
Beautiful. So what I'll give you an opportunity is I will start off the conversation. I like to start off the conversation with some of the basic questions, or at least I think the questions that maybe just everybody would ask. But then I'm going to step back and I want to at least give you the opportunity to ask a couple questions each yourself. But we'll start off with just some basic questions. I want you to set the scene for us, Ross, as to what you do. What does being an editor mean when you go to work every day? What does that even mean?
Yeah, so it's nowadays it's different than when I first started. So my general day looks like meeting with a team of reporters, deciding the stories that we want to cover and the space that they should get within the newsletter. So they're structured one through five, one being the one big thing, and that's kind of like the Axios calling card. And so we want the most important, the biggest talker. We want that story to be up top. Um, and then it's a lot of meetings to think of future stories, think of the best ways are we operating the most efficient way. Really unlocking the potential for reporters, like finding out what their areas of interest are they in the positions to accomplish that? Nowadays it includes some writing, so I'm a huge like Falcons fan and the Atlanta team. They don't necessarily follow sports, so I'll hop in and kind of do a column for sports for them throughout the season. And then usually in the afternoon, it comes down to the nitty-gritty of editing. So then I start getting copy anywhere from like 15-ish, 15 to 16 stories a day that you're kind of moving through and edits. You're producing the newsletter, so I'm also kind of the last line of defense for stories, making sure like these are good to publish, no errors, they represent our tone, represent Axios, without bias, etc. I'm kind of doing that final look as a reader and putting the product together. Um, and then the last part of the day for me is usually decompressing and just digesting like all the news, all the stories you just read through, all the words, and trying to store that so in the future it can help inform conversations as we talk about continuing coverage or as any other news might break.
And so that's a lot.
Yeah.
And did you realize that because a lot of the time when I teach an editing class, specifically editing, most students come in thinking, okay, it means that I will either shape the grammar, like from a technical standpoint, the grammar and how or maybe restructure the story so maybe it flows better, but that's it. So did you realize when you decided that you wanted to be a journalist and then eventually transition into editing that it would mean that you would have to do all those different things, the story ideation, this work collaborating with team members and reporters, the actual technical editing part? Did you realize all of that?
Yeah, you get a little bit because you see your editors, right? So like when I was a reporter, I would see what they did, but I don't think you get the full experience until you're actually in the seat. And then it's like, oh, okay, this is what it entails. So I found like a large part of editing is your people manager. And like journalism is a creative industry. At the end of the day, you're writing, you're producing content, you're making something. So your job, as much as it is to know style and to know what questions to ask and where to find the weak points and to make the story sing, you also get people's better efforts when they feel empowered and when they're in a good position. And so I think that part I didn't realize like, oh, this is a people first job. Like you can be the greatest reporter, but if you don't know how to communicate with or inspire your team. Um, then it's kind of like it doesn't matter how good you are because there's not enough time in the day for you to go and report out every story. And so developing that trust, I think, was one of the biggest learning curves for me. And just thinking like I would think like, oh yeah, it's obvious you're gonna go talk to this person, and then they would come back with a first draft, and they're not in there. I'm like, well, did you reach out to the other side? And they're like, no, and I'm like why not? Like it seemed like of course you would. And so you just have to be like patient and realize like, okay, since that didn't happen, we might have to hold the story, maybe we can like work around it. But being removed from the actual like information gathering process, you have to learn how to really like trust the reporter and being willing to like kind of offer that guidance.
And you've already alluded to this a bit in some of your answer, but just so that we're clear, what's the difference between an editor and a reporter? And you've
Yeah,
been,
so a reporter is the one who is actually out gathering the information. They're writing the story. Their name is on it. They get the byline, so they're in charge of a lot of times pitching the story, coming up with the sources of who they're going to talk to, actually going to do the interviews at the press conferences, getting photos, and then writing it. And then the editor is in charge of kind of taking that and crafting it into a story intended for the audience and for publication. Um, that's a little oversimplification because you're kind of involved in every step, right? So it's like I'm the one who typically approves the pitch, or in the beginning stage, if I'm getting a pitch, that's where I try to start poking holes. It's much easier. There was some saying like it's easier to ask somebody in the moment than trying to call them back, and you will find like you'll end an interview and 5 minutes will pass, and you're like, oh, I forgot to ask, and you go to call them back and they just don't answer, and you're like,
yeah.
we just talked, and like you need that one detail. So the more pre-planning that I can help with, of like, okay, what are the pain points going to be? Are we going to talk about this? Doing that in the pitch phase saves you so much time later on. So that's my responsibility there. And then some reporters, I'm like, hey, after you get your interview, when you're on your way home, like call me. Let's talk through the story, right? Like you may go into it one way, and then it's like, oh, actually, it said something that changes it completely. And my job there is like, okay, how are we going to frame this? And then I can assist in the writing. Then I'm doing the technical editing. Then I'm doing some copy editing and then publishing. So you're involved along that entire process.
Beginning to end. I love that. So I want you to tell me a little bit about your background. And you mentioned when I was a reporter, so you gave a little bit of it there. But tell me about your education, your work background, and then why you even chose journalism.
Yeah. So why I chose it, started in high school. I was like in study hall and just ripping our school paper. And I went home and I'm like, Mom, this sucks. And she's like, well, join it. And I was like, that's a good point. So started in high school, went to the University of Missouri to major in convergence journalism, which is essentially a combination of styles. So you had to be either doing kind of two multimedia styles. So whether it was TV or radio or virtual reality journalism or digital, you were combining kind of those aspects. It could have been photo. Started in the public radio sphere. I was never really loved TV journalism. The upkeep necessary and the stories and kind of how they told them. I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of, but I did work at like NBC station for a summer. So then I was a fellow in Milwaukee for Wisconsin Public Radio. Moved back to Atlanta, worked at WABE and GPB, going from like a general assignment reporter to more of a beat reporter, and working on kind of like web, building that up. Moved out to KUER in Salt Lake to become the editor at their public radio station before being promoted to managing editor, and then joined Axios in 22, spring of 22. Yeah, it's been about 3 years.
Time
Um,
flies.
yeah, where I'm an editor here now, kind of overseeing a handful of newsletters.
Mhm. And you talked about your engagement with reporters. That interests me because we did a lecture on this collaboration and f focusing on feedback. And so, how do you approach that? You know, you're dealing with one adult to another, maybe someone who's even married to their idea. How do you approach giving feedback to reporters, essentially your colleagues?
hmm Yeah, I think that's where the experience as a reporter comes in. And like, I don't know if this phrase is PC anymore, but like certain editors, you really are like killing their babies. It's like they put so much time and effort into these ideas and their reporting. And it's like, you're really like, this is my product. This is my, like some people, see their work as like a representation of them.
Mhm.
And so that makes it tough. And in those moments, I try to, lean on like my experience as a reporter and being in that seat. Like I know how it felt to be like you really think you have like the best quote or like this part has to go in and your editor is just like it's not really doing what you think it does, right? And like that's tough to hear, especially when it's something you're really excited about. So I always try to approach with like compassion. And then always be clear on like this is a conversation, not an edict, which sometimes it is. Sometimes it is me saying like, hey, no, we're not running this, we're killing this. But whenever I think you can feel like you're having input, you're much more likely to go along with it and understand. Um, Same thing when those are like the big conversations, but even with line edits, I try to make a note of like, hey, I'm making this edit because I think it reads better. But if this isn't your style, like maybe put this in your voice, but this is kind of what I'm thinking. So always trying to make them feel like they're a part of the process instead of me just coming in and being like, no, you have to write it this way. You have to change this. Having that like kind of back and forth. And then I feel like that builds trust for the tougher edits because I'm collaborative. I'm actually like, I care. I understand the work you put in. So now when there's a bigger story that we're really diving into an investigation, something that might involve the lawyer, like you can trust that I have your back in those moments.
I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to have Jonah introduce himself, and then we'll have some students ask some questions. But I will be back with more questions. But I just want to ask one more. I want you to think about the skills that it takes to be an editor, specifically an editor, right? There's hard skills. You talked a little bit about soft skills and then technical skills. So what would you say to the students? Like if I were to recommend you work on these skills, hard, soft, and technical, what would that be?
Yeah. Soft skills, definitely being able to one work under pressure. Like this still is a deadline driven industry. And there are times like being first still has merit and being able to stay level headed in like high pressure situations. Cause you'll have a time where it's like something's breaking. The reporter's like, we gotta get this up. And you may be like, hold on, we didn't do our due diligence yet in reaching out to this person. Like we may have to hold it for another hour. And they're like, I want to be first, right? And so being able to calmly get through high pressure situations and like explain your POV or your thinking. Um, Another skill, like trust your gut. You know, there are so many times where you may get something, you're like, "Ah, I'm a little on the fence." We had it happen this morning. Like one of the teams wanted to run like an April Fool's joke in a story. And it's like, that doesn't really feel good because if someone reads this and they don't click on the link that tells them it's a joke and it spreads, we're gonna have a lot more cleanup to do, and that's gonna damage us more than like the few laughs this may have gotten. Um, Another skill I would say now for sure, you got to learn how to use AI to assist you. That is huge. I think there are other concerns like, am I training this model to replace me? But you are more likely to miss out on a job because you don't know how to use AI than it is to come and take your job, right? Like if you I have something like you said, you guys are, like sports journalism, right? And if I'm looking at a story about this hitter and I want to talk about his trends. And I know I've throw that in ChatGPT and like, give me the trend of his, slugging percentage over the past decade. And I got it in 2 minutes, but you're still in their spreadsheets like, oh, let me control F, let me do this. I'm gonna have the story way before you're even going through the data, right? So like learning how to use it to assist you, and just what the role it's like a friend in your pocket that can help you turn in clean copy. That's going to be huge, I think, going forward. And then the soft skills, like be open to critiques, especially as an editor. I think one thing we move into this chair, and since you're not writing, you kind of get away from the constant critiques. But I'm always trying to ask, like, what do y'all need more from me? Like, if you're like, we need you to focus more on this type of editing or help us here.
Mhm.
Being willing to grow and like find trainings on like sharpening your tools, and then all the little things, AP style, proper grammar, how to write conversationally, um, being able to give people tips and tricks, I found is huge. Like if they're struggling with something, being able to say, "Hey, I notice you keep making this mistake. Why don't you try doing this and practice?" Because then that elevates your team. That elevates like you're getting cleaner copy. Then you can focus on bigger picture items, which makes your stories even better. So I guess summarizing, I would say AI, being a people person and being open to learn and listen and receive feedback, knowing how to give feedback respectfully, and then style writing and those kind of like technical skills of writing clean, sharp, and conversationally.
Great, great. I feel good because we've discussed most of what you said in there. We haven't done the AI part yet, although I've been thinking about how we can incorporate that in the future. So, thanks for getting us thinking about that. So,
Mhm.
Jonah, I wanted to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself really quickly. If you could share your name, your major, and where you're from.
All right. Greetings. My name is Jonah Hampton. I'm a junior sports journalism major with a Chinese studies minor from Prince George's County, Maryland.
I didn't know the Chinese studies part. That's very cool. Okay.
Nice, nice.
Yeah. I don't know how to say hello in Chinese either. I did it with Niles with Spanish. Anyway, so Niles, I'm gonna call on you. I would like you to share your first question or thought with Mr. Terrell.
Okay. I guess one of my first questions are, I usually always try to ask like this sort of question to editors, but like, is there anything that like any like kind of genre of story that when it comes to your desk you are maybe excited about, or it just feels like a weight off your chest as it's not something that could be a burden or like challenging?
Yeah, I think any enterprise story I get, and so when I say enterprise, it's like story that a reporter crafted the thought, went out and reported, and that's what they turned in, as opposed to just like, oh, we got a press release, or like, oh, I'm going to this press conference. Like, those are the stories I get most excited about because I know I'm like, it's something you reported on out of your passion, and that comes across in the writing. And so when I get met with that excitement, I'm like, hell yeah, like let's make this your best like story, you know. Whereas some of the other stories are like turn of the wheel and you got to fill gaps, you know, and journalists is like we're keepers of history, so like you have to do them. And those are fun and they have their place. But whenever it's something that like you are pitching, you got a scoop or you're doing an investigation and like you've been putting in that work and it's like I finally have something ready. I love editing those stories.
How much work does it take to edit one of those stories?
It depends. It can be a few days, and that's where like the planning really comes in. Because if it's a bigger story, then it's like, okay, we're having conversations. Like you might send your first draft, and then it's like, wait, we're missing some of these key voices. You need to go back and get them. And then once we get them, it might change the story. Um, some people are like, better as it the more you do it, like who've been in the industry 20, 30 years, like they got it down and you get it. And it's like, this is really good. Like whenever I'm able to kind of be transported from an editor to like a reader in that process and feel like I'm experiencing the story with you, it's like that's how like we have something here that's fun. Um, and then sometimes if it's investigative, it involves like we have to go to our lawyer to get a read. We go through like the standards and like that process is a little burdensome, but in the end, it turns out to be like much better as a result.
Yeah, yeah. Samaj, what's your first question for Ross?
Yeah, so my first question probably is just so I looked through just your background a little bit, some of your stories. I saw that you focus mainly in sports. So how do you pitch, or how do you, I guess, what does your pitch day look like in your like st brainstorming process on which stories to do, how to do them, or even from an editor standpoint, how do you decide who to send on the story, who covers it? Like, what does that process look like?
Yeah, so we have a focus at Axios. We call it your SME, so like your subject matter expertise. And essentially, I think like you want to have at least two areas that you would consider that. And another phrase like to be able to write a story off your head, right? Like if I would say now, like if you asked me to write a like sports story or a like city politics story, or like a cultural story, like I would be able to theoretically like, write that off my head. Like, yes, I would go get interviews to help, but like I could turn in a story just based on my knowledge and living. So that's my first lens. I look at it for who should cover it. So if I get a pitch for something, it's like, okay, who does this fall into? Like if you're a really good business reporter and this is about this new product that's launching, like, I'm going to put you on it. um so that's the first look. The second look is usually and you'll learn this through reporters, but like who's demonstrated an ability to be able to handle these like big picture stories. Like some people are really good at the day-to-day grind and they will crank out three stories like a day just with ease. And like they might not be as heavy hitting, but that's just what they're good at. Other people have a more drawn out process, but they can dive deep. They go down rabbit holes. They know how to do the research and get the data. And like I'll look at it through that lens. And then sometimes just like who wants it? They're like, is anyone interested in this? And if it speaks to you, take it. Great. Um, on the pitch side, when I'm pitching, I try to look at one, how can I tell the story in a way that nobody else is going to tell it? Um, I think a few years ago we had a series at the radio station as I was like, oh, we're gonna do a series on energy. And so obviously I'm like, oh, well, it's expensive, or like, yeah, how much, clean energy. But I'm like, what's a people first story in this? And it's like, how are lower income people being left out of the solar energy revolution, right? Like that's something that one, I didn't see people really covering, and two, it puts a human at the forefront of it. And I think that's the future, like the stories where you can have like a central compelling character that really drives the narrative. Those are the stories I think people really attach to and gravitate to. So when I pitch, I always try to think like, who's my main character going to be? Is this a story that I haven't seen or that's not being told? And then I think the most basic question is like, what would I want to know? Like if I was reading this, what information would I want to take away from it being in this position? And let me make sure that I include that. And if I'm able to cover all of those in my pitch, it's usually a higher likelihood of it getting accepted. Because if not, as an editor, I'm like, well, who are you going to talk to? And you're like, oh, I have no idea. So then what's the story, right? Or like, if I see, well, these six other outlets already have this up, so how are you pushing it forward? And it's like, oh, I don't know. So then why are we doing it, right? Like people have already seen it. So that's usually what I'm looking for.
I think NPR is great for that. Finding those,
Mhm.
like you said, the human story and things that maybe you wouldn't even think about or you don't. I just remember one time NPR said they were going to do a whole series on libraries for the whole week. And I was
Mhm.
like, I don't see the deep dive. And they did such an incredible job of how they helped entrepreneurs and who gained fame by getting on platforms that aren't normally associated with the library and how the interworkings of a library. It was just incredible
Hmm.
storytelling and information. It's yeah, you're right about that, about finding the human interest in these topics that maybe we even take for granted.
Hmm.
Um, so Jonah, why don't you share your first question with Ross?
My first question is, what is like the most difficult part of being an editor in your opinion, and how do you like deal with or overcome those struggles?
Yeah, I think for me it's delegating and trust. I think um there are a lot of times where like ego gets in and I'm like, I can just do it. Like just let me write it and it will be done in an hour and I know how what I'm gonna say, I know how to do it. And then you look up and a month goes by and you're frustrated, you're like, oh, this report is not growing. And I'm like, well, because I took every opportunity from them to actually learn how to do it, right? And that was something that was really hard when I was at KUERs because like we had a deadline like 4:04 around the clock is airing. We got to have our stories in. The host has to have stories. So if I'm waiting on like this 35-second piece and you're struggling to like put it together, I'm like, I'll write it. Give me the audio, I'll write it. It'll get done, but then that takes away from your growth and your experience and knowledge. So learning how to be patient and take a step back and realize like, yes, you may put a band-aid on the issue now, but if they don't get the chance or ever learn, you're going to keep having this issue and you're eventually it's going to come to a head where it's like, okay, I can't do this every day. Like I can't be trying to edit these bigger stories, keep everything on track, and I'm trying to write and fill all the holes because I didn't, trust a younger reporter to do it, right? Um, so that the building trust and then just being removed from the information gathering, like sometimes you learn like I think I said earlier, it's like you don't think you have to say it, but then it doesn't happen. And it's like, okay, I should have said it, and now we're kind of behind the eight ball. So I would say, yeah, trust, delegating, and having that patience that, for the most part, like everyone's doing their best and they're bringing their best to the table. And instead of trying to end the suffering, it's like help them through it, and eventually they'll become like a better reporter, and you can see that growth. That's definitely something I think I wish I would have done more of earlier on.
Mhm. I see Junius joined us. If you can you hear us? And if so, can you come off mute, share your name, your major, and where you're from, and then you can ask your first question.
Yes. Okay, how you doing? My name is Junius but third, also known as Trey. I'm a sophomore communications major with a minor in sports journalism from Los Angeles, California.
And
And do I say my first question?
share your first question.
Okay, so yes, I have my main question I would like to ask is like, how do you approach editing a piece, like maintaining the writer's voice while ensuring clarity, or like just impact overall? Or do you think like improving on storytelling or just like persuasive skills? I would say.
Yeah, one, nice to meet you, Shay. And I that's great. I think it's become harder in the virtual newsroom, so to speak. But honestly, a large part of it is talking to them as much as possible in meetings and conversations, so I can actually learn their tone. And then once I have that down and I'm reading a story, I can then be like, sometimes I'll get a phrase, and I'm like, I have never heard you say this, like ever. And we talk like 3 times a day for the past month, and you've never used this word. Why are you trying to use it now? Right. And then there are other times where I'll make an edit and I will try to note like this is how I would say it, but if this isn't how you would say it, like put it in your voice. Because I think sometimes like edits can be a little subjective, and it's just like, yeah, I wouldn't say it that way, but I try to ask them like, but is it wrong? Like, does it convey something it shouldn't? Is it wrong or is it offensive? And if it's none of those, then it's just like, okay, then leave it alone, right? Like it's not your story, your name's not on the byline. But really talking to people and like one of the big ones you'll get is when something closes and people say shuttered, it'll be like this, so and so shuttered their stores. And I'm like, we've hung out and talked, and you have never said shuttered. And you wouldn't call your best friend and be like, oh, did you hear that bar shuttered? You just like, oh yeah, this bar closed. So then say it like that, right? So I think that's a key thing. And then having them read the story out loud, as I always try to say, like, get done writing it, take a minute and come back and like actually read it out loud or talk while you type. That way you're putting it in your voice and you're not using words that you traditionally like would never say or that feel like jargon. And I think that really helps as far as like using your voice and then for me making sure like I'm not taking too much away from it.
Nice. I've never said shuddered in a conversation, just an FYI.
And it's in so many
It is.
stories.
You're right. I see it. I see it in lower thirds, everything. All
Mhm.
shuttered. So before the students will ask another question, I had a couple more for you. I wanted to know what kind of tools you use in the newsroom every day.
Yeah. So big one, AP style book. Always logged into that. It's a huge thing. Like if you have a question, just go there and search it. The majority of our communications on Slack. I would also advise like get Signal. I know it's been in the news a lot lately, but that is huge. I think we're seeing, especially in this administration, a lot of concerns with people coming to the media and at risk for their job, but that protects you in case you do have an anonymous source or something happens. They can subpoena your cell phone records and all that. The Signal, you're kind of protected. So Signal to communicate with sources is huge. And then each station I've been at has kind of had their own CMS, just like their content management. So here at Axios, we use Eden, um, and it's pretty intuitive actually. I like it a lot. But Eden, I can't remember all the ones I've used in the past. Oh, but planning, Notion, is a big planning tool. So is Airtable and like the AP Planner, which we're about to roll into, move from Notion to AP. So being able to use those like planning tools are big as well. And then, like I said, another one's like ChatGPT, just diving in. So like um, I made a customized one the other day that I've been experimenting with, and like it's been great. So being able to like use those tools, I think those are what I'm using day in and day out. And then the other good skills to have are just like your basic like Photoshop skills, knowing how to like lighten up a photo a little bit or crop it or do a little basic editing. And I think it's always good to be comfortable with Otter. Any transcription website, so we use Otter here. You can actually send it to like a Zoom meeting and it'll like record it for you and like give you a transcript. But being able to like move through Otter. And then we have a number of like data tools that are kind of like in-house through a platform called Hermes. But the more comfortable you can get with just kind of like that basic coding of like, how do I clean data? How do I input it? How do I change it if the graph isn't showing what I want? Um, those are all like pretty big tools.
How much does data inform your decisions as to what story to give the green light or not?
I probably don't use it enough. I do get a daily Google Trends email just to kind of see which I also recommend signing up for. Comes once a day. It's really insightful and it breaks it down by region, like by state. Like this is what this state's really interested in. It'll give you like overarching topics. And that is really helpful when it comes to headline crafting. Because if I see, oh, this is what people are looking for, then like our URL, our headline should, respond to that. Like if people are searching like egg prices and we write a story and we're just like, oh, your breakfast might get more expensive. Well, like they're not searching for that. They're searching for like the cost of eggs. So
Right.
like eggs need to be in the headline, the URL, right? So I look at that for sure. And then if there is a story that's trending or like our in-house metrics are showing, it's like, okay, that's a good sign that either we need to do a follow-up, we need to make sure this is like leading the newsletter, make sure we have links to other stories that Axios has done about it to drive up that SEO for it. So you're definitely like paying attention to those.
You said SEO. Tell us what that is.
Yes, search engine optimization, which I believe no one actually really knows how to make it work. But social traffic to stories is dying if it's not already dead. Like Facebook and X like used to be huge drivers of traffic, but they have deprioritized news. So you just aren't seeing the same gains from posting a story on Facebook or it going viral. Like now, if you post a story on X, it's like you just see the picture, a tiny headline, and most people are just reading the tweet, right? Like they're not clicking on it to go read it. So your best bet is Google picking it up in search, and that's how most people are finding stories. They're not going to home pages and scrolling through. They're searching for it. So your URL and your headline are direct components to that. And it's like you want that to be what people may be searching to find this story. Um, and that's another thing I use ChatGPT for. Like I'll put a story in there. I'm like, hey, can you suggest some URLs? Can you suggest some headlines? And then I'll take them and tweak them. Sometimes I like it. Sometimes they're terrible. But making sure your story is searchable and is ranking high in its Google ability and like in other platforms, I think is like the key.
So you still have to edit ChatGPT.
Oh yeah. Don't never trust ChatGPT all the way, but it can be a good start.
Yeah. Now, what's your second question? Oh, are you there now? I will go to Samaj real quick.
Well, I guess for my second question, it would be how I think how to word it.
Okay, take your time.
But I guess with especially with heavy stories, like heavy political stories, stories that do have an impact on the world, how do you maintain sort of speaking to what's right, but not necessarily advocating for something? Like, how do you maintain that balance within a writer's voice or even just as a publication? How do you maintain that balance?
Yeah, that's there's definitely a reckoning around that in 2020 and 21 coming out of like COVID and George Floyd and the protests. And I think part of it is one, having that conversation with yourself ahead of time is like, this affects me, right? Like we're journalists and we're not supposed to have bias, and there's certain things we can't do, like run for office and petitions and all that. But like you're still a member of the community and it still affects you. I say that to say sometimes I think that is a bonus because when you are able to write from that perspective, people feel like you are a part of this community. You're not parachuting in here to get a story and leaving, and they're likely to come back to more stories. So I think the trick is sometimes it takes getting all of it out, like just get it all on paper and like, okay, this is how I actually feel about this, and then going back and cleaning it up and toning it down. One thing I try to do though is when I'm editing and I see something that's questionable, I'm like, could we back this up with hard data and facts? Can we attribute this to someone else, right? Like you may not be able to say it, but there's more than likely someone else who feels the way you do. Find them and let them say it, right? Like have that be in someone else's voice. Um, and then it's like you can also rely on your expertise to kind of work through some of those issues. Like if you feel like, okay, like let's say you get hit by a hurricane and you're struggling and like help isn't coming from FEMA. You can use the story and be like, historically, FEMA has been slow to help. We saw it here, we saw it here, and we saw it here. And now I'm showing you instead of just telling you like, yeah, FEMA sucks, right? So the show but don't tell, I think is key. And then also realize like, but I'm still affected. Like, I still don't have power and I still live here. So I get the frustration, but your neighbor also probably doesn't have power. And so there's a store down the street. And so so go talk to them and let them say it. But it is tough for sure. There are times I do kill a lot of lines where I'm like, this is pushing that envelope a little too much between editorializing and writing the story. Um, so yeah, I would say either just get it out and then clean it up, find someone else to say it, but then also like kind of like write from your lived experience.
I love that. Jonah, what's your second question?
So I know you mentioned earlier that I think you went from being a writer to an editor, if I'm not mistaken. So what
Mhm.
was that transition like? Was it a difficult transition, or did you find ease because you already had the experience as a writer like previously?
Yeah, a little of both. I pull the analogy like I think some of the best coaches are ones that played because now it's like, hey, when I'm telling you this, I'm not talking to you as like I read it in a book or like, oh, I saw this online. It's like, no, this worked, like I did it, right? And so that part I did find kind of easy is like if I go to report, I'm like, hey, can you go out and get this? Or like he makes this story. It's like, I'm not telling you this just because I think it's good practice. I'm like, I can point you to a time like I did it and it worked, right? It was difficult. I think a lot of people like walking away from the byline, like, I mean, that's real. It's cool. Like, it's super cool when you see your name on like the front page of something, or I'd be, reporting a story and like NPR once, and I'm like, NPR like wants my voice like nationally. Like, hell yeah, I'm doing this story. Right? Like, that's a great feeling. And when people might slack your message, like, yo, I just heard you on NPR, like that's great. So walking away from that, I think definitely takes some adjustment of like, you're no longer front and center really per organizations and as well as like to the public. Like sometimes it could be a thankless job. I think in the newsletters, all I get is a italicized line. It is the last thing in the newsletter that says this newsletter was edited by Ross. People don't really know what that means, right? Like, oh, great, he edited it. I'm like, well, in reality, I came up with helped come up with this lineup. I touched every story here. I changed this. I did like this whole production, and it's reduced to a single sentence. Whereas like the reporters, their names are at the top. It's in each story. It's in their outro. So, um, being able to like leave behind the need for that like thanks or to be seen is unfortunately a part of it. And that I'm like, yeah, that's pure ego. I know it, but it's still tough. And like, there was a moment last week, there was a breaking story, and I'm like, oh, hey, I already got this written. Let's get on the alert. Let's do this. And somebody else, I'm like, hey, reporter, like, you did a great job. And I'm like, so I didn't do shit. Like, I didn't help. Like, all right, sure. But once you get over that, I think it makes it a lot easier. But just transitioning from like, my goal is to help you be successful and not necessarily like be in the light or win the awards or be at the, on the panels and stuff. And I think once you overcome that, like that transition, the skill is like journalism is journalism, right? You still want to tell a good story, you know what it takes. So then just bring that to the editing process.
I've been trying to say that in our class that sometimes it can feel a little bit invisible. And
Hmm.
if you do your job really well, you're invisible
Right.
at least to the public. And yeah, yeah, I agree with you. Do you ever, so sometimes I see you write a couple of sports stories there. Do you feel like that sometimes you have the itch to write or report on things that you like or care about every once in a while?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I will say that's a huge benefit. Is like I can now be more selective around the stories I want to do. Whereas like sometimes as a reporter, a formula I would have is like three for them, one for me, right? So like every three stories that I had to do, I was going to do one that I wanted to do. Whereas now that balance is more so like one for me, right? Like, oh, I just want to write. I just want to get out there. So what's happening? What's something that interests me? Okay, yeah, cool. I'm gonna do a story about that. And if I don't want to, technically like don't have to. Um, there are some times though I do like to stay up to it. One, just so I can always be like relatable. And there was a stretch last year where like my San Francisco team, one reporter's on vacation, the other one got sick. And it's like, hey, we still need a newsletter. And I'm like, oh, that means I gotta write it, right? And so it's like now I'm writing this newsletter for a city I've been to twice, don't live in, have no sourcing, but it was still like a learning process. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what it feels like from your seat every day. So I do like to still hop out just to like get the experience and stay sharp myself. But I'm also way more selective just with time and everything. And it's like, I'm not interested in that or I'm good, then I just won't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Junius, what was your second question for Russ?
My second question would be like, what's one common mistake like you see that aspiring writers make when trying to publish or just be recognized, or just if they had a position, to like from experience, is there like should they focus just how they should improve their writing, or do you just say like what would you tell them?
Yeah, kind of in still the saying is like let the game come to you. Like when you chase like stories just to go viral, like just for the sake of it, it doesn't look good. Like it feels cheap when you're like chasing clicks. Um and that's not what you want to be. But when you put in the work and you have a consistent output of like, hey, this person really cares about the story, this person like takes the time and they have the attention to detail, and you build up your sourcing, not only do you start putting out good work, but then people start coming to you. And then it's like, oh, wait, like this thing just happened. Hey, Trey, I want you to have the exclusive, right? Like I want you to tell the story. And then those stories start to gain more traction and start to have a bigger ripple effect. There's someone in Atlanta. Her name is Stephanie Stokes. She works at WABE, but she covers housing and city politics. And like, she's not putting out stories every day, every week, even maybe like, one here, one a later month, but they are so like they're just fantastic stories. They're just like you can tell she went to the court with the person and sat through hours of waiting and hearing. She like went back the next day and then she found a good source and she's like going through and like putting out these, good like 5, 8 minute stories that just have depth, they have character, they hit you in the heartstrings sometimes, they leave you frustrated, like, man, this is the city. And I think if you are willing to take the time to really build your sourcing and like travel the unbeaten path and find a unique angle, that's like the key to making a name for yourself instead of just being like, oh, look, this is like, yeah, this might get a bunch of clicks, but it's like empty calories. So that's what I would say is like be patient, build your sourcing, take that time to really like have a solid foundation, and then it'll pay off.
Very good. So we only have about 10 minutes left before we have to go. So I wanted to make sure I get a couple of questions in. Um, First of all, I want to know so you've mentioned a lot here. So you've mentioned giving feedback and to Junius's point, even how to call out mistakes of someone. You mentioned that your writing background and from a technical standpoint, this ability to ideate, collaborate to guide all of that. How does a student, where do they start to gain some of these skills? It seems like a breadth of skills, but where do I start? Where do I say, I want to be an editor? These are the things that I need to work on and obtain to get to that point.
Yeah, start by writing, like finding internships, whether that's writing for fun, like start there and develop your voice. And then I think once you develop your voice, it's easier to critique other people's voice. And then a huge thing about journalism, I think Nicole, you said at the start, it's like a small industry, like network, right? Like if there's an editor that you are aware of, if there's a publication, reach out and like, hey, can I shadow you, right? Can I do you have any tips? Can I follow you on Zoom? Can we meet? But like really like network. And then don't be afraid to like ask for those opportunities. Like if you're starting somewhere as a GA reporter, an intern, like pay attention to the editing process, not just the fact like, man, my story's getting shredded right now, which was like me at the beginning of my career. It's just like, oh my God, I suck, right? Like, I mean, stories were just getting ripped up. But it's like I wanted to pay attention to like things that I liked that editors had, and then things that I didn't. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna do this. Like, I had an editor. She used to open my story. She'll read it and she's like, nope. And I'm like, okay. So I might go back, I write. She does it again. She's like, no, this isn't it. And I'm like, well, then tell me. Like, clearly I'm not getting what you're looking for. So like, give me advice, right? And so I just like, I'm never gonna do that. So if I'm making a change, I try to explain like this is why I'm changing it, or this is what I'm looking for. Um, so like really just glean from other people. Like pay attention to the process, network with people, ask to shadow them, hop on Zoom, even for 30 minutes, ask them to send you examples, to send you tips, and then ask for those opportunities at the places you're at. Like when I was a reporter, I'm like, hey, can I like my stories are done today. I'll get them done by noon. Can I spend the rest of the day doing edits myself? So now I'm having that hands-on experience, and it's like it's not going to go straight from me to air, but like I'm trying it, and then you can come in and be like, hey, this is good, but you should do more of this or do less of that. But really be ambitious and like if you want an opportunity, I have learned unfortunately is not always going to be given to you just because you're doing great work. Like in fact, people acknowledge, hey, you're doing great, just keep doing it. And you're like, no, I want more. So ask for it. Like, I want to learn how to edit. I want to peer edit. I want to do this and really like seek out those chances.
Nice. You mentioned a little bit with Stephanie. I think you said WAB,
Mhm.
but can you share with some of the news outlets or news organizations that you admire that inspire you when you go to work?
Yeah. So I am a huge reader. I do read Axios content. Like especially AM and Finish Line. I find Finish Line to be interesting because they do more kind of like lifestyle. Like they want to end the night with something fun because the day is so heavy. So they usually give you a cool thing. I'm a fan of the athletics newsletter. I read that one every morning. I think NPR storytelling is fantastic, and what I would like learn from them is how to build a scene. And like, yes, they use sound, but how to build a scene, how to transport people into that moment, because you can do the same with words. So listening to NPR, I think that's good. WAB is a great station. I don't know if you listen to Closer Look, like with Rose, like her interview style, I really appreciate, and that's another local one. Um, I've kind of stayed away a little bit from national news just because it is so like Trump dominant right now, and it's just like I don't love CNN, I don't love Fox, I don't love MSNBC. The New York Times here and there will have bangers. It's like, oh, that's a good story, right? And ESPN's deep dives. I don't necessarily love all their day stuff, and sometimes there's like little errors. It's like, you didn't catch this. But when they actually have a deep dive on a topic from like their key beat reporter, those are solid. And then The Atlantic, they also have some good pieces that I would say check out. Like they have some good writing as well.
Well, they had the signal story.
Yeah. Like, which that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a
But
whole.
yeah, they're solid.
Uh-huh. Niles, I asked if you wanted to ask your second question.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump right in. Maybe another question is, I'm not sure. Sorry, I had to do something, but I'm not sure if anybody asked this, but what were some of the uh, what were some of the key moments within your career that kind of like pushed you to be where you are now? I know a lot of people say like maybe like one article might have gotten them to really break out on the scene. Others say that they have like a mentor or editor that has helped them really establish themselves within the journalism field. So you have any of those stories or just any of those moments that really just helped you become who you are today?
Yeah, I think wanting to create change on the institutional level, I think often it's like, oh, so many communities are underrepresented and reporters and the newsrooms, and it's like we turn to certain communities only when things are bad. Like I've never seen so many Latino sources, and it's like, oh, but we're only asking about immigration. We're only talking to them about their fears and their concerns, right? It's like they have life outside of that in soccer. It's like let's talk to them year round. But I think a huge part of that is if you don't have Latino reporters, then how would you know to go in the community and talk to them, right? So I saw that and I was like, okay, I can do all I want to feature Black voices in my stories and to feature like African American experts. Um, but I'm one person doing one story in one city. In order to change it, I think it's like we gotta have more people sitting at the table, like making the hiring decisions, right? And so seeing that, I was like, okay, so the path is like newsroom leadership. And so now I'm in a position where when it comes to hiring interns, when it comes to hiring reporters, when it comes to being on these committees, it's like, yeah, I get this person may have an extra 2 years of experience, but like I can be an advocate for people who may not get the chance. And I think being able to control that, it's like ultimately my goal was like to run a newsroom, before I turned 30, which COVID happened. And then I was like, actually, I don't want to do that anymore. So I might get back to it, but that was kind of really it. It's like to make change, it has to happen from the inside. And in order to make it happen, you got to have a voice and you got to be in a position where you can have a voice. And so that's really what's kind of like pushed me to the stage.
Yeah, I'm glad that you are in the editor position and you do get to use your voice to actually impact and influence the internal workings of a newsroom because that really directly influences the output that reporters do. So just as an
Mhm.
aside there. So I think I have time for one more question. And I wanted to ask lessons that you want to lead this students with. I mean, put it out there. If somebody didn't tell you, you want to tell them right now. What do the students need to know when they're considering this career as an editor, or maybe even deciding, I'm not sure if I want to do this?
Yeah, I'd say a few things like one, like always have a learning mindset. I think one of the things I do miss about like being in the newsroom is like I learned so much when I started just from like listening to my colleagues make calls and interviews. I'm like, oh, that's how you say it, right? Like, or I would be on the interview and they would hear me kind of struggling and they would come over and be like, no, say this. And if he does, whatever. So like always look to learn. Even now, it's like just reading other stories and I try to talk to other editors of like, hey, how would you handle this, right? Like having that growth mindset is huge. Um, I think also understanding like what journalism is like it's a fun job, but it takes a toll. Like, especially in this state when half the country doesn't even think we deserve jobs or that our field should exist, when the administration's kind of like very litigious, and it's like, you got to be careful because like they will sue, and they like Axios has been sued, and the restriction of press access. So like, consider that, it's a lot. Or I've also learned people don't necessarily want to have conversations. Like we get an email from this one woman anytime it's a Trump story, and she's like, fake news. And I respond like, hey, like, let's have a conversation. But what about this is fake? She didn't respond the next day. She's like, oh, so you're just, and I'm like, okay, you aren't actually trying to like talk and improve this. You just want to, get your rocks off. So realizing like there is a toll. And I often you are kind of at the line of that. Like I take as like I'm on the reporters team, I'm defending them. I'm carrying the case up the ladder for certain things. And rarely are you off the clock. Like it's fun, but it sucks sometimes. I think there was a couple years ago, it was like when the power outage happened at the airport. It was a Sunday. I'm like, oh, I'm at dinner. And I get a call like, hey, we need you to get to the airport. Like the power's out. And I'm like, oh, it's like 6 o'clock on a Sunday. And they're like, just stay until it comes back on. Or now something breaks and it's like, yo, Ross, we need to get the story out. I'm like, yo, it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday. I'm like, but that's sometimes what the job requires. But then other than that, it's like try to make it your own. Like I said, it's creative, and once you are able to get over that like entry barrier of just being told like go here and do this and do that, once you can show that like oh no, you can handle these stories and like you were good at pitching your own stories. I think you can have a lot of fun with it, and I think no 2 days are the same, and I really appreciate that. Like you don't know what you're going to get. You can think it's going to be calm, a huge thing happens. You can expect something to go crazy and nothing comes of it. So just be open for the journey. And you're never too late to switch. Like there's no such thing as, oh, I left, now I can't come back into it. Um, yeah, it's a fun ride.
It's a very fun ride, and I have come out and come back in several times.
Mhm.
So I think once you're a journalist, you're always a journalist.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ross, thank you so much for your time, and I always find your story and just the way that you communicate compelling. So I appreciate you sharing with all of us. Did anyone have any other questions or thoughts that they wanted to share? Okay. All right, well, great. Then let's see, today is Tuesday. Sometimes I lose track of my days, and we will meet in person on Thursday to talk about what Ross actually had mentioned, and that's how to write a headline. So come prepared. We'll do an exercise in class, and I'm gonna give you some tips and some ways to maybe write some headlines on the fly, and we'll have some fun. Thank you so much for your time, Ross.
Yeah, awesome. Glad to be here. And all of you, thank you. I appreciate the questions. I'm a huge LinkedIn guy, so if you're on there, send me a connect, Twitter, whatever, but keep in touch.
Nice. You heard him, LinkedIn, Ross Terrell with Axios. Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you so much.